Who were the Watchers and the Nephilim? What are humanity's ancient origins? Find out as Rudy Landa's groundbreaking series unveils archaeological and cultural evidence on Earth of fallen angels and giants.
Were commissioned by the University of California Anthropology Department to explore the legendary cave that was already known for its huge deposit of guano. Bat droppings that at the time were in high demand for the manufacture of gunpowder. Notes from the dig were compiled and published in what is now an extremely rare book, aptly called Lovelock Cave. It was authored by the two archaeologists in charge. The book details that the cave yielded over 10,000 archaeological specimens. Among them, duck decoys, baskets, rustic weapons, and some 60 mummified skeletons. Also among the finds, a sandal that measured over 15 inches in length. And while the notes of the dig in no way mention it, multiple oral accounts from the region say that the cave yielded skeletons that by some accounts were upwards of 7 to 10 feet tall and had red hair. Lastly, included in the book is a photograph of the curious remains of what some insist is a child, while others are convinced that this is an alien creature who presumably lived among them, or at least died among them. Again, a conversation for another time.
And there was some other bones too. There was like an arm of a human with the fingers on it, probably a Paiute Indian. Next to it, there was another bone. It looked like, I'm not an expert in anatomy, but it's obvious they set it up to compare it. There was another bone, this bone right here on the arm, next to that. And it was about 4 inches longer, it looked like to me. So I'm sitting here looking at the bones, touching them and doing all this kind of stuff. And then I asked her, what happened to the giant skulls? Because there was some Indian skulls there, but the giant skull that we read about was gone. She said that the University of California had taken nearly everything away. And I guess it's happened on more than one occasion too.
How the giant skeletons ended up on display is not really clear. Finding out is no easy task, especially when these days the museum vehemently disavows their very existence. However, what mankind can erase from history, sometimes it cannot erase from memory.
To me, it looked like, well, because it's laying on the floor.
Okay.
And it's in this glass enclosed. I guess it was supposed to be a coffin, I don't know. But from his, like, here down, I mean, he looked enormously long. So to me, he was 7 feet or more.
And the bones were all together and not pulled apart.
They were interlocked. I mean, they were just, the bones went with the body. It wasn't fake.
M.K. Davis and Don Monroe are a renowned research duo in the United States. Don Monroe is the only known person to have ever photographed the giant skulls in the museum. His pictures have made their way all over the internet and major networks. They were contributors to this film and were kind enough to share with us some of their resources of their studies of Lovelock Cave. This is an interview that was filmed by them some 10 years ago with a local woman in Winnemucca, recounting seeing some of the giant skeletons on display there in the 1980s.
To me, the nose holes, the nostrils were larger, and the skeleton, the head of the skeleton was not humongously different, but it was longer than what a normal skeleton head that I've seen.
Yeah, and when you saw it, what was your reaction when you saw it for the first time?
I just thought, oh my God, because it was so big. I mean, I've never seen it. My brother's 6'6", 6'7". This thing was a lot bigger than my brother. And I mean, to me, it was just, I've never seen anything that huge, that long. So when he was standing up, you know, it would have...
He would have been like a giant, really.
Yeah, to me he would.
Yeah.
He was a giant laying down, so I can imagine if he was standing up.
Exactly. One thing that's really interesting is I spent several days in the town of Winnemucca, and what they told me was the gentleman that I was interviewing, he said, Rudy, there are bones in this town. People used to collect them and keep them in their house, but people don't like talking about it. They said, as a matter of fact, there were big town hall fights when the bones went missing because they were accusing the university And here we go with the conspiracy theories. The University of California borrowed them for research, but nobody checked with anybody. They were, oh, sure, take them, you know, so they took them. So what I wanted was, I wanted a second opinion. I wanted other people to talk, and I really attempted, I really tried, and they just did not want to talk. They didn't want to talk about it. It just seemed like it was the secret that everybody just wanted to keep. So they were very, very, very tight-lipped about it. And so as far as, you know, conspiracy theories and whatnot, unfortunately, it's become, for me, conspiracy theories are actually my way of defending things now, as opposed to attacking people with them, because there's just so much evidence about the fact that the academic world does not want to have their world turned upside down, you know, and a lot of these things would totally absolutely do that. Something that's amazing, something you guys might want to try because it's a lot of fun, is you can actually get on Google, there's actually a couple of sites that you can sign up and look at periodicals, at old newspaper articles that have been, you know, uploaded by the thousands, tens of thousands. And in Kankakee, Illinois, I spent probably about 4 hours or so just going through them and found 3 accounts in 4 hours, 3 accounts of actual giant bones dug up. They used to put them on the newspaper. Every time it would happen, it was a big deal. They would put them up on the newspaper. At one time, there was a respected newspaper at the time called the New York Times. Yeah, I don't know if you guys ever. The one now is not a. I get it, you know, but they actually would publish these articles, and you know, some of them are on the film, but they would say these bones were unearthed at this mound, and you know, you guys, if you're from Ohio, you know how many mounds there are in Ohio. So there's a lot to that story. But let's move on. So there's one thing I want to point out in this clip right here. If you look at the wall, and I don't know how well you can see it, but if you look at the wall back here, do you see those stones, how just perfectly square and tight-fitting they are? You see these stones over here? Not so much. We know for a fact that these stones here are Inca work. These stones here, they would have you believe are Inca work. They're not, all right? And we can prove this. If you build something beautiful, if you're skilled at doing something, right, would you ever build the base of it beautifully and then do the patchwork on top sloppily? You would never do that, right? So this is a walk through the streets of Cusco, and they're looking at that very thing, the difference between the megalithic Cusco. Let me go backwards here. Look at the difference again. Look at this clip right here. Do you see the underneath part here? Do you see the bottom? All of those are ruins. They were actually built. When the Incas came to Cusco, they rebuilt Cusco. Cusco was in that condition. The entire city of Cusco, it's amazing. When you go into a restaurant, anybody been here, by the way? When you go into a restaurant in Cusco, you'll walk in and sit down, you'll turn next to you, and you'll see a megalith, and you'll see sheetrock on top of it. It's pretty funny, you know? Because they've rebuilt the entire city on the ruins of the megalithic Cusco. This I find really, really funny here. Famous Inca buildings. You look at a Google search. Every single one of these was not built by the Incas. There is just no way that they were built by the Incas. Did the Incas build the megalithic structures? The complex was built by the Incas in the 15th century. Okay. But this is the thing. That's what academia insists on. And if you say otherwise, you're ignorant and deserve the death penalty, you know? So we're going to move on here. I want to show you this little video. This is a complex called Sacsayhuaman in Cusco. And where traditional fortresses are walls that keep the enemy out, this is a little bit different. This is a place of gathering for people. The walls are there to keep you out from the more elevated parts. So let's look at this real quick. Those stones right there that park has the biggest megaliths in the Western Hemisphere. Gigantic. We're talking about over 100 tons on some stones. Unbelievable. Let me pause it right here. I want to draw your attention to, where is it? To this quadrant over here. See this area over here? Okay. This whole area Must have been some kind of it could have been anything, just a market. A lot of people think there were sports that were played here, dances, ceremonies, whatever. But that place up there is a little bit different. This is what it looks like from the air, okay? And of course, the low-hanging fruit for the academic world is, well, there are ruins. There were temples there and whatnot. The funny part is, when you talk to the descendants of the Incas in today's world, they tell you that's not what was there at all. What they tell you is that in this part over here, this was the temple of the shrine to the sun, the dwelling of the sun, and that there were two other towers where the lower gods dwelled. That's what they say. So something really interesting about this. Does it conjure up any images in your mind? Check this out. How about that? Yeah. I mean, virtually the same idea. Now, there's something else that's really interesting about this. Again, here's the complex. This is the way that it looks now. People visit, people take pictures, but look at the size of these stones. I mean, gigantic, just tons and tons. Take another look from the air. There's one more thing that's really, really interesting about this area of Cusco. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's talk about this for a second. These are the stones within the city. Again, even though they're all megalithic, they have different designs to them. Some of them are super smooth. Some of them are more more bulky. Something really interesting. Do you guys see you see these nodules right there? See that? Something really, really interesting about that. Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea whatsoever what those nodules are all about. Do you see them there? Can you still see them? See that right there? Okay, that's the pyramids. That's in Egypt. Yeah. Same rocks, nodules, gigantic. These particular ones are a little bit more like the street of Cusco because they're kind of bulky, kind of whatever, not refined. But that's right next to them. So now we're back. So you see the nice smooth. Those seams are so tight that you literally cannot fit a human hair in between them. So again, do you see the congruence, the similarities that in that time should not have been? I mean, if we're going by the narrative of academia now, how could it have been? Cusco's got so many little hidden secrets and is absolutely full of symbolism. They're very big into the serpent, the puma, and the condor are a really big deal to the Inca, and it was basically a heritage type of thing. They inherited these beliefs from whoever came before them. As you can see, you've got on one, you got this guy, the serpent, and then you got the puma. Now the next one is really a head scratcher. The whole entire city of Cusco, old Cusco, is actually built in the shape of a puma. Yeah. Anybody familiar with the lines of Nazca, by any chance? Okay. Why from the air? Why the lines of Nazca are these amazing figures that are drawn in the desert and the highlands where it practically never rains. But why again? Why the aerial view? How does that? First, forget for a minute how. Why is really the bigger question. So again, for me, the takeaways are just unbelievable from the standpoint. And there's so much more. There infinitely more. But for me, what's amazing is the spiritual component, as we talked this morning. I think I told you guys a story this morning of how we came across the last Inca priest. I was completely by almost just by divine intervention. So I'm going to let you guys listen to his interview. He's just amazing. The whole thing was amazing.
We meet Nicolas, and he invites us into his home. Nicolas, a humble and hospitable man. Upon entering into his home, we are given a single coca leaf. He does this to announce us to his spiritual guardians. He has agreed to give us an interview and allow us to ask him questions about some of the mysteries of the ancient days of the Inca and the ones who came before them. As we ask Nicolas questions about the Quero's spiritual mysteries and faith, he will first notify his spirit guardians with a few words in Quechua. And they will approve or disapprove of the questions we pose. If he answers our questions, he's been given said clearance.
Our oral tradition speaks of a world before this world. This planet was completely enveloped in water all the way around. And in there, gravity was not the way that we know it to be now. It was much lighter. And in that world, there were beings that we knew as the churpas, which were roughly twice as tall as we were. Supposedly, they were androgynous, neither male nor female. These beings had to leave this planet and go to a planet known as the Apus. We revere them as the guardians of this planet. So when our lands begin to have poor production, when our animals don't reproduce, or when we ourselves fall behind on our production, we ourselves turn to the guardians of the planet and we ask them to help us with direction so that we can make the best choices, so that this planet can keep on developing as well as evolving.
The description of Nicolas's guardians bear a striking resemblance to what we would expect the Watchers to be.
The difference between your culture and ours is that we have developed our medicine without the need of a scalpel. Unlike you, we have developed a perfect adaptation to different places without the need for technology. When we work alongside the guardians of the earth, we can modify our internal structure, our internal makeup. We can heal mentally, emotionally, physically, even symbolically. But all of this has to do with levels of understanding. There is a level of understanding, for example, where the only place to evolve to is death. When some people achieve the necessary level of understanding, these beings that we're talking about are as real as you or him, beings that we can hold our hand out and say, hey. But if that person does not have the correct level of understanding or enlightenment, meeting one of these beings or interacting with them could mean an instant death of that person. They are very much in charge of this planet.
Are you capable of meeting with the Watchers, the Guardians, and when you do, is it in a mental state, an ethereal state, or a physical state? Okay.
The Quero, we always have a relationship with the Guardians, a tight-knit relationship. As long as in our culture we have our levels of enlightenment, say from the 5th level up, it's like having an afternoon meeting. We will get together tomorrow afternoon. Great, we'll get together tomorrow afternoon. At the beginning phases, it's a subconsciously conscious relationship. But after this, it is absolutely a conscious and physical relationship. The first phase is something more like telepathy. Beyond this, there are a lot of processes that we go through to make sure that, say for example, this empty space starts to speak. It starts to talk to us without there being anything visible there. Eventually, it begins to take form until it becomes a being that you can physically see. But those are phases in which we ourselves have to train our very own biology, because the untrained biology cannot resist that high level of vibration and frequency.
Well, that brings me to this question. So we have been going around and seeing these massive megalithic structures, fortresses and walls, huge stones, pre-Inca. Are the Guardians the ones who gave the wisdom or the ability to shape these stones, to transport these stones, and to build these massive structures?
In a manner of speaking, yes. As it turns out, human beings have untold capacities. within themselves. And what the guardians do is teach you how to channel and use these capacities. A person with those capacities activated can take things that are impossible and make them possible. So in that regard, yes, they were given the processes through which people, or some people, could have extraordinary capacities to do things.
We bring up the issue of the serpent symbology to Nicholas. And for a change, the answer deviates from the narrative that we have so surprisingly received thus far.
The symbols of serpents everywhere, serpent iconology. How is that associated with wisdom in your teachings and the things that you have studied, and how far back does it go?
Machajo, that is what we call them, or amaro. They are two different concepts. The amaro is correlated and has everything to do with being able to activate or deactivate the different chemicals within our makeup. It's the symbology for that which makes us understand what we have to do according to each circumstance. Almost like written scripture that says, this is what you do in this circumstance. So when we find ourselves in those places, that's what we turn to know what to activate and deactivate within our bodies. On the other hand, the machajo is related to beings known as the sacras. The machajo is a different type of serpent that is not a sacred serpent. It's more of a common serpent. They are correlated to beings known as the sacras. There is a lot to be said about the sacra. The sacras are mystical beings. They came from a different planet or star to the earth and participated in the creation of us. They participated in basically starting us, creating us. Normally they are depicted with faces that are reptilian-like or cat-like. In Paucartambo, for example, we have the festival of the dances of the sacras. Every year they come out and dance. In Puno we also have the sacras who come out with masks that are reptilian-like. Their costumes are very colorful, very golden and silver, and their faces are depicted, again, very cat-like. So to recap, there are two serpents. The serpent that represents the sacras and the serpent that is correlated to the knowledge of the activation and deactivation of chemicals within our bodies. So in that sense, in that context, it would represent wisdom, knowledge.
Two serpents. The Amaru serpent is seen as the serpent of wisdom, the serpent associated with science.